the record button. So this is 9:29. And we're making a list of things that all living things have. So what do you have? Okay, Kevin claims that all living things need energy. What else? If you had not come up with anything prior to now, you should be doing that on your own right now. So we'll hold about a second. Yeah, there's no choice there. So. Okay, so we say it can reproduce. What else? Yes, sir. Okay, has some form of growth. What else? What else? Okay, produces waste. There's a wonderful children's book called Everybody Poops. I think that's what we're getting at. Okay, what else? Made of atoms? Now, are non-living things also made of atoms? Okay, so that wouldn't be exclusive to living things. But yeah, everything is made of atoms. So we want things that are just living things. What else we got? What else is true of all living things and no non-living things? Needs water, okay. When you say needs water, like needs to drink water or absorb it somehow?
Yeah, like absorb it.
Okay. What else?
Do you need sunlight or some type of light?
Are there living things that live down deep, dark in caves? That's a good thought, because most things do, including us. We need it to synthesize vitamin D, but not all living things need light. What else? Is this a pretty good list? Is this a good list?
But relies on something.
Relies on something? So do you mean like chemically, emotionally, physically?
Sure, like food or
So let's see. Would that kind of go with need energy?
yeah.
Okay, in terms of if we think of it in terms of food. Okay, what else? What else we got? Ooh, communicates. That's an interesting one. Part of an ecosystem. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let's do the brainstorming. So let's add all the things. Needs sunlight. Let's see. I'm picking up ones that I spied over people's shoulders. Communicates. Relies on something. What are some other ones we have? No matter how crazy, no matter how wild, no matter how wacky. What else do we have? Anything else? So on these, can you knock anything out of here? And we had started to do this yesterday with the whole, voted off the island. If you can think of a living thing that doesn't meet that criteria, you can eliminate it. Well, okay, name me a living thing that does not need sunlight. Do bats come out of caves? Do you know that they don't need sunlight? How do you know? Okay, so they come out at night, so they're nocturnal. During the day, they're typically in dark places. So, okay, we can probably say that that one we can strike. What else? Okay, name me something that doesn't communicate. Actually, they do, chemically, but not in a way that we understand, like they don't speak. What about bacteria? Never forget bacteria, people. You're outnumbered. You know that, right? Do bacteria communicate? Not in a way that we understand. Not in any way that we understand. Do we know that for sure? Yeah. So, you know, I think we can probably strike that one. What else? Okay. Name me a living thing that doesn't rely on something else. Anything. Like it's connected to other things somehow. Does a shark need to eat fish? Kind of relies on them then. Kevin, does a fish need to eat things?
Yeah.
Okay. Name me something that doesn't rely on something. I like this one better and better the more we think about it. Yes? Is the sun a living thing? Okay. Really? You haven't eaten anything in your entire, what, 16 years of existence?
We don't need meat. We can be vegetarian.
Are plants living things?
Yeah, we don't eat plants.
Okay. And are animals living things?
Yeah.
Do you have to eat either plants or animals or some combination thereof?
Be vegan.
What do vegans eat? Plants.
I thought they didn't eat anything like
They eat plants. They don't eat any animals. They don't eat any animal products. They eat all plants. Lots of soybeans. Mm-mm. I was at one point in my life, but no. So what, can you name one living thing that doesn't rely on something else? I like that one more and more, the more we talk about it. You know what somebody else had on their sheet was part of an ecosystem. I spied that. And you know what? These two seem to me to be very related. Those seem to be very, very related. Okay, anything else that we want to add? So based on our conversation here, I want you to do number 4 on your own. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, growth, food and energy, some sort of food and water, and being part of an ecosystem. Anybody have different things than that? You said growth, energy, reproduction? Okay. Okay, what else? What you got, Noah? Breathing? Maybe something that doesn't breathe. Bacteria? So, just, did we mention in here exchanging gases the other day? Okay. So, like bacteria don't breathe in the way that we think of it, but some of them are still dependent on some environmental gas, either oxygen or CO2. So you want to be careful when you say breathing, because breathing kind of implies, lungs. Trees don't do that, but they take in gases. So I would be careful with your wording. Okay, what else? we're talking about here are characteristics of living things. So you just built that list, that characteristics of living things list. And now we're going to look at what your biology textbook says are the principal characteristics of living things. So, it says that all living things have some features they share. Cells. You guys mentioned that. Organization. You hinted at it, but you didn't mention it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Energy use. You mentioned that. Homeostasis is probably a new word for most of you. Growth and reproduction. You mentioned both of those. Let me say a word about the structure of these partial notes. Do you notice that there's a whole lot of empty space? So what's actually on the slides and in the blanks is only a fraction of what you should be writing. When we mention an example of something, when we talk about a thing that fits this, all this empty space is so that you can make extra notes. Okay? If you just fill in the blanks, you're really not taking notes. You're just filling in the blanks. But it's also really dumb for me to have you copy every single word because that's just ridiculous and it's a big waste of time and it makes me crazy and it makes you crazy. And we don't need to be any crazier than we are. Okay, so let's talk about that first one. So all living things are made of cells. And what we have here, these are pictures of individual bacterial cells. I'll be circling this. So those are individual bacterial cells. This is a single-celled organism. That's the entire organism right there. One cell. This thing is called a volvox. Volvox. And volvox is a bunch of individual cells that work together to get some stuff done. But then we start to get up into these Gesundheit, bigger things, things like this. This is made of more than one cell. Not all the cells in it do the same things. Not all the cells in your body do the same thing. Some cells in your body expand and contract, your muscle cells. Some cells in your body transport oxygen. Which ones are those? Which cell? Red blood cells, yeah. They transport oxygen to every cell in your body. So once we get up into these more complicated things, plants, nice little smallmouth bass there, we start to see their cells doing different things. But one thing is true, no matter if it's a single-celled organism, like these, or if it's something pretty complicated, such as yourself. Cells are always tiny. Can you see a cell with the naked eye? No. No, you have to use a microscope, like this, to see a cell. You cannot see a cell with your naked eye. Why are cells always small? Wouldn't it make sense to have really big cells? Wouldn't it make more sense to have really huge cells? I mean, we've got all these cells. Wouldn't it be more efficient to have fewer of them, but just have them be larger? Okay, so there's, if you were only made of 3 cells and they were really big, if you lose 1 cell, you've lost a significant portion of your body. So that's true. But there's another reason. That's a good one. Nobody's ever mentioned that before. Yeah, it's true. The fewer cells you have, the more losing one of them is a problem. There's another reason. So I want you to imagine, well, first of all, let's talk about there's a cell. There's a little nucleus. Maybe there's some other stuff in there. I think it was in the other class somebody mentioned all living things have, they said, all living things have some kind of skin, don't they? Isn't there something that divides a living thing from what's not a living thing? How do you tell what's you and what's not you? You have an outside surface, your skin. Does a bacterial cell, does an individual cell have an outside surface? Yeah. And we call it a cell membrane. Okay, we call it a cell membrane. And it's what divides what's inside that cell from what's outside that cell. So cells are capable of moving things across this membrane. Okay? It's called a semi-permeable barrier. What does semi mean? Semi means partly. Semi means partly. Means that things can go through. Okay? Is your t-shirt permeable to water? If you sweat in your t-shirt, will sweat travel through your shirt and end up on the outside? Yes. Your shirt is permeable to water. A cell membrane is semi-permeable. So, semi means partly. Permeable means stuff goes through. Stuff goes through. So a semi-permeable membrane means some stuff goes through. It means some stuff goes through the cell. So why does that matter in terms of how big or how little cells are? Jacob, head up. Thanks. Why does that matter? Cells are three-dimensional. We draw them as these little flat, squiggly things that looks like a fried egg with a tiny yolk. But they're three-dimensional. They're like little water balloons, really. So if you imagine all these little water balloons, the cell membrane, the outside surface, is like the surface of this cube. So, how do you figure out surface area? What's the area of the surface of that little cube? Length times height times number of sides. And the number of sides on a cube is 6. So length times height times 6. So for our little 1 centimeter cube, what's the surface area? Well, it's 1 by 1 times 6. So the surface area of our little 1 centimeter cube is what? 6 centimeters cubed. Okay. Well, all the stuff inside our cell is like the inside of that cube. So that would be like the volume of the cube. Let's move this guy up. So how do you find volume? This one's length times height times width. So it's basically the 3 dimensions of the cube. The 3 dimensions of the cube multiplied together. So for our little 1 centimeter cube, what is that? What's the volume of that little 1 centimeter cube? 1. 1 cubic centimeter. So which is bigger, the surface area or the volume? Yeah. There's a lot more. You get 6 times as much surface area as you do volume. So if you're moving everything in and out through that surface, it's like you have 6 people working for 1 person. Okay? So for every 1 unit of space inside the cell, there are 6 times that amount of space that's moving stuff through. So now, let's look at some of our bigger ones. So let me cut that. Cut that. So that's our 1 centimeter cube. What about our 4 by 4? Our 4 centimeter cube. So for surface area, we said it's length times height times 6. So what's 4 times 4? 16 times 6. Whoops, we don't have the calculators down here. Awesome. 96? 96. Brianna's right. .96 cubic centimeters. What about the volume? So the volume would be 4 times 4 times 4, or 64. Whoops, and this is squared. Sorry. Cubic centimeters. Which one's bigger still? Surface area is still bigger, but is it bigger by as much? Is it 6 times the volume? No, it's not. Let's see. What's the ratio here? Oops. So it's 1.5 times as big. So here, let's see if I can shrink that. There we go. You've all done ratios in math, I think. So here, surface area to volume is 6 to 1. By the time we get to a cube that's got a side that's 4 times as big, it's 1.5 to 1. So it's like you got 1.5 people working for every person to get stuff in and out. Let's look at our 6 centimeter cube. So the surface area would be length times height times 6. So what's 6 times 6? 36 times 6. 256? 216, sorry. And now the volume is going to be 6 by 6 by 6. Well, hey, that's the same thing we just did. So now what's our ratio? 1 to 1. So what happens as we get bigger? Yeah, we start to get to a point where the volume is actually greater than the surface area. We actually have a ratio that where, there's less surface area, so fewer people working to get stuff in and out than there are things or people that need it. So why do cells stay so small? Yeah, otherwise it's really tough to get stuff in and out. It becomes increasingly difficult to get everything that you need in and out of that cell. So if cells were not small, what would happen? Oh, don't freeze up now. Cells are little because it keeps the surface area to volume ratio good. Your cells use sugar. That's why sugar gives you a little kick in the pants. Gives you a boost. Your cells use sugar. And staying small means that cells can get all the sugar they need in and all the waste they need out. If a cell gets too big, they starve. Or they drown in their own waste. They can't survive when they get really big. So, the largest known cells, there are cells that are visible to the naked eye. There are cells that are that large, but they're still very tiny. They're barely visible to the naked eye. Most cells are microscopic, and it's because of this. Because the bigger you get, the harder it is to manage getting stuff in and out through that cell membrane. So a large cell has a really hard time managing its materials. You are better organized than you think. You are better organized than you think. You are organized at a molecular level. That means chemical. Your body, the cell of a bacteria, a plant, all of those things, get chemicals to specific locations and organize them. Your cells right now are pumping sodium and potassium and chloride in and out of them. It's all happening right now. If those chemicals aren't in the right spot, bad stuff happens. So there's a disease called cystic fibrosis, and the problem in folks with cystic fibrosis is that their bodies can't pump chloride ions correctly. And so they end up with a buildup of mucus in their lungs, and they're really prone to infection. They have a hard time breathing. They end up with, very often they have a hard time digesting food. And people live with it, but life is harder because a part of the organization of the body has broken down. The body isn't moving chemicals to the right spot at the right time. You're moving cells to the right spot at the right time. So, if you are having a hard time breathing, in people who have congestive heart failure, and this happens very often as people age. I think they say something like 90% of 90-year-olds have some degree of congestive heart failure. Because the heart's a pump, and it gets tired. That pump does wear out. Things wear out. The combination of your blood, or your lungs, your heart, your whole circulatory system are working to get blood cells to where they need to be at the right time. And they're getting blood cells that are carrying oxygen and blood cells that have already dropped off their load. It's like a series of dump trucks. And they're getting to the right spot at the right time. It's kind of mind-blowing if you think about all the things that are happening in order for you to just sit here. It's astounding what is going on inside you. But that's not the only way you're organized. So you're also organized, and all living things are organized, in levels. So if we get a bunch of cells together that are doing the same job, they form tissue. And you are made up of muscle tissue and fatty tissue and connective tissue. And there are other kinds of tissue. Your skin is made of epithelial tissue. And we can put a bunch of tissues together and we get an organ. Your heart is nothing more than a bunch of muscle tissue, fatty tissue, connective tissue, nervous tissue. There are nerves in your heart that give it signals that make it pump. And that's keeping you alive. And if we could put together a bunch of organs that are working together to do a job, we get an organ system. So the heart and the lungs and all the blood vessels and arteries in your body, those are all doing a job. They're circulating blood and oxygen through your body. There is a respiratory system. There's an immune system. What do we get when we put the whole darn thing together? An organism. You, a plant, a blue whale, a bacteria, a daffodil. Now, of course, bacteria don't have organ systems. They don't have tissues. You have to have more than one cell to have tissue. Okay? You have to have more than one cell to have tissue. So we'll add only multicellular organisms have tissues. And on up. If you don't have tissues, you can't have organs. If you don't have organs, you can't have organ systems. But this word organism, a living thing, this is what we're going to use to talk about living things all year. You're an organism, so is a maple tree. You're an organism, so is a bacteria, so is a mouse, so is a daffodil, so's an insect, So are the beautiful flowers growing out there. So's algae in the pond. So's an earthworm. So's a little clam. So's a crayfish. You're all organisms. It just means a living thing. Plant, animal, fungus. So's a mushroom. Okay, tomorrow when you walk in, you will have a brief recall quiz. We're going to finish these notes tomorrow. And Thursday, you're going to have a quiz on this. So we're doing sort of a fast and dirty on this. This is something that we could draw out for a long time, but we're going to do a small quiz on Thursday over these ideas. And then we're moving into our first sort of real unit. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns?